This is a channeled message for myself and for anyone else that finds themselves resonating. I've been sitting in meditation or contemplation with the guides, which it took me a little while to even connect to them because I was very emotional, very upset. I had several events happen over the last week or so, but last night was one that really triggered some fear in me. Well, first anger, then fear. Which then enabled me to go deeper into my own personal fears as being in a human body on this planet at this time, and questioning my path, my purpose, why am I here, all over again. Because so much doesn't make sense. And yet it does at the same time when I look at it from the perspective, universal perspective, but acknowledging how difficult it is to be down in the density of Earth, of this experience here, to witness all of the suffering, all of the pain, all of the death, all of the injustice, all of the duality, and actually be in it but not of it, brings up a lot of fear. And then there's the survival aspect. Am I really going to be able to survive on this planet on the guidance and faith that has always shown itself to be there when I need it? Yeah, I think that the heat's getting cranked up through the collective, and my humanness, my human fears have really taken over me today. I was woken up, actually I woke up in the middle of the night, and to go to the bathroom, and when I laid back in bed, I heard some yelling, some screaming actually come from outside, and it was like 1-2 o'clock in the morning. And it was enough that I felt the energy just like a shock wave go through my body. So I jumped back up. I looked out the window. I didn't see anything. I came out here into my dining room and looked out my bay window. And my cat was looking out there with me, and she started growling. And then I looked and I saw a person coming out of the woods, out of my backyard, jumping into my garden. And instead of being afraid, because I have this strange instinct that overrides fear and goes directly to anger, I ran for the door and ran outside and yelled. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And of course, I don't know if it was one or more people. They did run away, thankfully. But it brought in a lot of energy, and it wasn't until later on when I finally had made sure that as I went outside and I combed my property to make sure that there was no other people out there in the middle of the night, and there weren't. Mind you, I'm all alone here. When I came back inside is when the anxiety and the fear took over. Like, wow, Paige, this isn't the first time you just had a knee-jerk response to something like that and just put yourself in a potentially dangerous situation. But that protectiveness, which is Also, I call it an anger that has always protected me. It could get me into trouble one of these days. I don't have much control over it. There's no thinking involved. It just is a reaction. So then I laid awake, wide awake, for hours after that, contemplating that experience along with many others that have crept up into my life to trigger fear and anger and anxiety in me. And I surrendered today. I just said, I don't know what you want me to do, universe. I don't know why you want me to keep looking at fear. Am I going to survive financially? Am I going to survive physically? Am I going to survive emotionally? These are the thoughts that just took over me throughout the day today. Of course, we're coming close to tax season here in the United States, and I wait to the last minute. Those are the things that also bring up fear, anxiety, and anger in me. So sitting here asking, why? Am I on the right path? Am I not seeing this situation properly? And I got the message of grace and disillusionment. Disillusionment because there's a big part of me that embraced the spiritual journey and this ability to read energy and connect and communicate with extraterrestrials and non-physical beings and higher guides. Like, it seems like it would make life a piece of cake, right? Yet, it's actually the opposite. The disillusionment is that there's a part of me that thought it would be easier, my life, once I embraced this. And in some aspects, that's true, because I'm no longer operating under a filter and a mask and a false ego persona. Yet it's harder because I can't fully play by the rules of the Matrix game, yet I kind of have to, and do that with trust that I'm going to be guided into the right ways of navigating that. That requires a tremendous amount of blind faith. And grace. So if any of you are in the same predicament of feeling like you know who you are and you know why you're here, we're all here to be a part of humanity's ascension, humanity's awakening, and the elevation of the frequencies through the human species. And when I'm reminded of that, it grounds me, it brings me back into place. But I can certainly lose track of that when I get pulled too deeply into fear, anger, and resentment of this false matrix that we were all born into. So again, if any of you are in the same spot where you know in some sense why you're here, but in other areas, because we don't fit in, because we can see what many cannot see, although a lot are starting to see more. It's a double-edged sword. It makes it more challenging to be here. So that remembering, that knowing who you are and why you came here, why we came here to be a part of this elevation, this evolution in humanity. It's supposed to be like our greatest time being alive, yet we're kind of dragging in the mud and the quicksand of the lower density energy still. And we do need to have that faith, blind or not. Because if you can reflect back on things just magically or mysteriously working out, at least having your basic needs met on the path to finding yourself, or on the path to that you're following because your soul's leading, this is why. We can fall into the fear program. We can fall into negativity, negative thoughts, negative beliefs, anger, despair. Many do. Many will be. But there are many of us that we have a very strong soul calling internally. And that soul calling will not cease to exist. And it is stronger than any other force that we are faced with on this planet. So recognize that. Recognize your soul. Recognize your soul's calling and directing you and pulling you in the direction of the path that you had laid out before you got here, before we got here. And trust. It's not easy. Don't fall for the disillusionment, especially through a lot of the other spiritual stuff, that it's just all going to be easy breezy, magical, and fantastical. Sure, there's going to be elements of that, but there's going to also be elements of challenge and fear, anger, despair, suffering. We're going to witness, we may even experience ourselves. Remember why you're here. Remember who you are.